Most people didn't notice the cleaning crew at Milford Global. Not out of malice, just habit. They came in after hours with carts that squeaked, changed trash bags in silence, wiped down glass walls and marble floors. Banned, before dawn like the final flicker of office lights. It was Monday morning in downtown Denver. The lobby echoed with the usual storm, dress shoes clicking on tile, rapid-fire texts being thumbed out between sips of coffee, voices trading deadlines and vendor names like currency. Everyone in motion, everyone late for something. Graham Whitaker, the company's CEO, had just stepped out of the parking garage and was making his usual brisk walk toward the elevators when he heard it. Voice. But not just any voice. Sharp, confident, warm but rolling in Mandarin, so fluid it didn't sound rehearsed. It stopped him, not because it was Mandarin. It spent years flying in and out of Shanghai for quarterly deals. What froze him was who was speaking it. He scanned the lobby and saw her. A woman in a deep blue custodial uniform, sleeves rolled to her elbows, standing near the touchscreen building directory. Her locks were pulled into a low bun, face focused, but kind. Gesturing calmly toward a confused-looking older man in a visitor's badge and thick reading glasses, she was explaining something. No, translating something. Graham narrowed his eyes. He recognized her vaguely. She was the one he passed late at night, sometimes always quiet, always nodding if acknowledged, always moving like she didn't want to take up space. He didn't know her name. But there she was, handling Mandarin like a native speaker. He slowed his pace, watching. Then it happened again. A delivery guy holding a clipboard stepped forward. She turned to him and, without missing a beat, switched into Spanish.
All the kind tourists pick up in college.
This was smooth, professional, grounded. Gracias, senora, the man said, blinking. Then came French. A third-person vendor pointing at a mislabeled shipment of electronics was met with a faint smile and "Seize cases vont and sail to be. Just lot. A gauche." 3 languages in under 2 minutes. Graham stood frozen by the elevators, a knot forming behind his ribs. Not discomfort, not suspicion, something more human, guilt. He had built global strategy decks, led expansion teams, hired multilingual consultants, hosted diversity panels, and here in the building he led. The most linguistically gifted person he'd encountered all year was mopping the marble floors before most of the office even arrived. He stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said, voice gentle. She turned, startled for a split second, but composed. Her eyes met his. "Yes, sir," he nodded, smiled faintly. "That was Mandarin, right?" "Yes, sir." "And you speak it fluently?" "Yes, and Spanish and French?" She gave a small nod. "And ... anything else?" he asked, now half joking, half hoping. She tilted her head slightly. "Portuguese, Arabic, Swahili, German, Italian. I can read Latin, but I don't really count that." He blinked. "You're telling me you speak 9 languages?" She nodded again, gently. "Yes, sir." There was no pride in her tone, no vanity, just a soft, matter-of-fact calm. A truth so plain it carried more weight than any resume he'd read that month. "What's your name?" he asked. "Naomi Redd, Miss Redd. ... Are you free for a few minutes?" Brows lifted slightly now. "Yes," he said, gesturing toward the elevator. "I'd like to talk in my office." There was hesitation in her eyes, not fear, just that familiar pause of someone used to being overlooked. Then, slowly, she nodded. "All right." The elevator door opened. He held it for her. And as they rose floor by floor in silence, something unspoken rose with them. The elevator hummed as it climbed. Floor 409. 15. Inside, Naomi stood with her hands clasped in front of her, her gaze steady but soft, as if she were bracing herself for whatever came next, good or bad. Graham broke the silence first. "How long have you worked here?" She hesitated, then answered, 13 years. He turned to look at her. "I started right after my daughter started kindergarten. It was the only shift that let me pick her up from school. Nights, weekends, always cleaning, never talking much." He nodded. She wasn't oversharing, just stating facts like weather or time. "I don't think I've ever seen you during business hours," he said. He gave a small smile. "That's by design." The elevator dinged. They stepped out onto the 18th floor where the carpet was thick, the light was soft, and the air smelled faintly of leather and lemon oil. The receptionist glanced up, surprised to see Naomi walking beside the CEO. Graham didn't explain, just nodded and kept walking. Inside the glass-walled office, he gestured for her to sit across from his desk. She did carefully, like she wasn't sure if the chair was truly hers to sit in. Her eyes didn't widen at the view. They didn't linger on the espresso machine or the awards on the shelf. She just looked around, quiet and present, like someone who had learned how to take everything in without making noise. Graham sat across from her, leaning forward slightly. "I'm going to be honest," he said. "I didn't plan this conversation today." She nodded slowly, not surprised. "But I just watched you switch between 3 languages without blinking, and I have to ask. How does someone with your ability end up working here, mopping floors?" Naomi was quiet for a moment. Then she looked toward the skyline, exhaled, and said, "You got time for the truth?" "I wouldn't have asked otherwise." She rubbed her palms together like warming them for the words. "I was born in Cleveland, only child. My mom worked in a laundromat. My dad was a bus mechanic. Good people, not rich. But they believed in learning." She paused. "I got a scholarship to Ohio State, majored in linguistics, spoke 5 languages by graduation. I had big plans. Then life hit. My mom got sickling cancer. I dropped out of my master's program to take care of her. Then 6 months later, Dad had a stroke. Just me and bills after that." Her voice didn't break. It didn't need to. The silence in the room held it. "I worked wherever I could. Retail, food service, temp work. When I found this job, it paid just enough and let me pick up my daughter. I stayed and kept learning languages," he asked softly. Naomi nodded. "I borrowed CDs from the library, found free courses online, read newspapers in French, Arabic, Portuguese. It kept my mind sharp. It made me feel like I still mattered." She didn't say that last part for sympathy. It was just true. "Most people never asked," she added. "They saw the uniform and assumed that word landed like a weight between them." Graham sat back, breathing in deeply. He was no stranger to hardship, but Naomi's story, it hit something different. It wasn't a story of failure. It was a story of brilliance, buried under years of quiet resilience. "You ever think about doing something else?" he asked. A soft shrug. "Sometimes. But dreaming feels risky when the rent's due." He nodded. Then he reached for the notebook on his desk and scribbled something. She watched him. "What are you writing an idea?" he said. But in truth, it was more than that. It was the seed of a decision that would ripple through every floor of that building and beyond. The meeting with Naomi lingered in Graham's mind long after she left his office. Even during vendor calls and budget reviews, his thoughts drifted back to the woman in the blue uniform. And the way she had calmly unraveled her story, no drama, no plea for help, just a quiet offering of truth. By 3:45 that afternoon, he stood in the elevator again, this time going down. He stepped out into the building's service level, a floor he hadn't walked in years. The air felt warmer, the walls were scuffed, the lights buzzed faintly above his head. He passed a stack of bottled water, a tired maintenance crew, and then finally, the janitorial supply room. Through the open door, he saw her. Naomi was restocking microfiber cloths onto a wire shelf, her sleeves now rolled even higher, her forearms dotted with faint chemical stains. "Mind if I bother you again?" he said gently. She turned, startled, then blinked. "You came down here?" "I couldn't stop thinking about our talk," he said. He stepped closer. "Listen, I have a favor to ask." Naomi wiped her hands on the front of her shirt. "What kind of favor?" "There's a meeting happening right now upstairs. A delegation from our Snow Palo office showed up early, and the translator canceled last minute." She tilted her head. "Portuguese?" He nodded. A beat passed. Then she said, "Yes, I can do that." Moments later, they stepped into conference room for C. Inside, 4 Brazilian executives sat quietly, scrolling through their phones. The energy was off, tense, uncertain. Then Naomi walked in. She didn't make a grand entrance, no theatrics. She just smiled, nodded once, and greeted them in flawless, confident Portuguese. The room changed. You could see it, the shift. Shoulders relaxed, the eyes lifted. One of the executives cracked a joke. Naomi laughed, responded, more laughter. Graham watched from the back of the room. He didn't understand the words, but he didn't have to. He understood what was happening. She wasn't just translating. She was connecting, making people feel heard, valued, at home. When the meeting wrapped 20 minutes later, one of the Brazilian execs turned to Graham and said, "In English, she's better than anyone we've worked with this year. Where'd you find her?" Graham smiled, glancing toward Naomi, who was already stacking empty espresso cups onto a tray. "Right here," he said quietly. As they walked out, he asked her, "You ever do this professionally before?" Naomi shook her head. "Only helped folks in hospitals, city offices, things like that. No certificate, no training. My daughter needed me more." He nodded slowly. "And where is she now?" 26. "She's a nurse in Tempe," Naomi said, eyes softening. "Paid her way through school. Stubborn like her mama." They both smiled. And for a moment, it didn't feel like CEO and janitor. Just two people who had carried more than they ever said out loud. Back at the service level, Naomi was ready to clock back in. She still had 2 more floors to clean before shift change. But before she walked away, she paused and said, "I didn't do anything special today." Graham looked at her, eyebrows raised. "That's not how it looked to me." She gave a faint smile, then turned and disappeared down the hallway, pushing her cart into the quiet. That night, Graham sat in his car long after the parking lot emptied. He thought about the pressure of growth, the board meetings, the polished reports on diversity initiatives, and then he thought about Naomi. All those years, all that talent, hiding in plain sight. And in that moment, a question rooted itself in his mind. What if the future he'd been searching the world for had been mopping the floor 2 levels down this entire time? The next morning, Naomi's badge beeped at the wrong time. She had just finished wiping down the east lobby glass when Ron, her supervisor, tapped her on the shoulder. His voice was cautious. "Hey, Naomi, Mr. Whitaker wants to see you again." She blinked. "Did I mess something up?" Ron shook his head. "Didn't say. Just told me to send you up." She cleaned her hands on a rag and took the elevator back up. Same as yesterday, but this time it felt different. As she walked through the main corridor, people looked up. People who had never looked up before. One of the receptionists gave her a polite nod. Another employee in HR offered a faint smile like they knew something she didn't. When she arrived at the executive floor, Graham was standing by the window, sipping black coffee, his tie a little looser than usual.
What?
"Come in," he said, still facing the glass. She stepped in quietly and waited until he turned around. "I've been thinking," he said, setting his mug down, "about wasted talent. How many people we walk past every day and never stop to really see." Naomi said nothing. She'd learned a long time ago that most people only brought you into the room to make themselves feel generous. But then he said something different. "I want to create a new position," he said. "One that doesn't exist yet, but should have. For a long time." She furrowed her brow. "What kind of position?" "Cultural liaison for international affairs," he replied. "Someone who can speak the languages, read the subtext, help us stop fumbling through cross-border deals with Google Translate and guesswork. Someone who can connect, not just interpret." She stared at him, stunned. "You're qualified, Naomi. More than some folks sitting on the 12th floor right now. You've already proved that." She crossed her arms slightly, protective. "This real? As real as it gets?" "I don't have a degree," she said quietly. He nodded. "You have something better. Lived experience, discipline, and the ability to speak to someone in their native tongue like it's your own." Her voice dropped. "Why me?" He held her gaze. "Because yesterday, I watched you solve 3 problems in 3 languages before 9 a.m. And because I'm tired of seeing brilliant people overlooked, while others get promoted for knowing how to schedule a meeting." She was quiet. "You know what people will say?" she added after a pause. "I don't care," Graham replied. Naomi stared at him, long and hard. Then slowly, she nodded. "I've never had an office," she said. "Never had a title. Learned fast," he said. "I don't have the clothes for this kind of thing. We'll set up a clothing stipend." She chuckled softly, the first real laugh of the conversation. "You thought of everything, huh?" "I'm trying." Then her voice softened. "What about my shift?" He smiled. "We'll find someone, but let's be honest, no one's replacing you." She looked down, then back up. Her eyes were glistening, but the tears didn't fall. You sure this isn't charity? Graham shook his head slowly. This is long overdue. Naomi let out a breath, deep and steady. All right then, she said. Let's see what I can do. They shook hands. And in that small moment beneath the fluorescent office lights, amidst spreadsheets and skyline views, history began to rewrite itself. By Wednesday morning, the building was humming with whispers. No official announcement had been made yet, but that didn't matter. The news traveled faster than emails ever could. Naomi Redd, the quiet woman from the night shift, the one who pushed carts and scrubbed grout, had been promoted. To what? Nobody was quite sure. But the rumors painted 100 pictures. She must have been a government agent. Now I heard she's fluent in 10 languages. Maybe she saved the CEO's kid from a car crash. No one knew the truth. But everyone had an opinion. In the staff lounge, 2 marketing assistants leaned in over chopped salads. I've got a master's in international business, one muttered. Been here 2 years and I'm still waiting for a promotion. Meanwhile, she was scrubbing toilets last week. Her friend shrugged. Maybe she knows something we don't. Oh, please, the first one scoffed. It's a PR move. Make the company look progressive. Check a box. That same energy trickled into Slack threads and side conversations. People weren't used to the latter being. Skipped. Naomi felt it. From the moment she walked into her new office, a modest space on the 12th floor with a window and a nameplate, she felt it. The glances, the hesitation in people's voices, the half-smiles that didn't reach the eyes. She didn't say anything. She just put her mop away for Gadand, sat at her desk. The first thing she did was pull open the bottom drawer and place her old janitor's badge inside. Not to forget. To remember. That afternoon, she met Victor. Head of International Operations. He walked in with a clipboard and tight eyes, didn't sit, didn't smile. So he said, glancing around her office, "You're the new liaison." "That's what I'm told. You have experience in corporate settings?" She smiled, calm. Only from the outside looking in. He didn't laugh. "I've got reports from Italy, a vendor problem in Dubai, and a pile of messy paperwork from São Paulo. Think you can handle all that?" Naomi stood. "I'll need a few hours to review, but yes, I can handle it." Victor dropped the folder on her desk with a heavy thud. Then he left without another word. Later that evening, Graham stopped by. "How's day one?" he asked, peeking through the open door. Naomi leaned back in her chair. "I've had worse." He grinned. "Victor give you a hard time?" "He doesn't scare me." I figured. She hesitated, then looked at him. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything?" "Why now?" Her voice lowered. "Why me? You could have just given me a bonus and moved on." Graham stepped inside, leaning against the wall. "Because I saw myself in you." She raised an eyebrow. "You were a janitor?" "No," he laughed. "But I was the kid from nowhere. My dad fixed cars in a town no one remembers, worked nights, waited tables, sold shoes during the holidays. I knew what it felt like to be overlooked." Naomi nodded slowly. "And now," she said, "you're the one holding the door." He nodded. "Exactly." They sat in silence for a beat. Naomi glanced at the file Victor had dropped. "I'll be honest," she whispered. "I'm nervous." "Good," Graham said. "Means you care." She looked up again. "Some people won't like this. They'll get over it, or they won't," he said. "Either way, we're moving forward." He gave her a nod and turned to leave. Naomi looked around the office again. She remembered all the birthdays she worked through. The nights she cried in bathroom stalls because her feet ached and the bills wouldn't wait. The years she was invisible. She opened the drawer again and looked at the janitor's badge. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. She was here now. She was bringing all of herself with her. By Friday morning, the news became official. A company-wide email landed in every inbox at Milford Global. From Graham Whitaker, subject: New cultural liaison. International affairs. The message was short, direct, clear. Naomi Redd's name was spelled in bold, her role outlined with precision. It wasn't a gesture. It wasn't a favor. It was recognition. "She's the best person for the job," the email said. "Her language, fluency, cultural insight, and problem-solving skills are unmatched. Period." Most read it twice. Some smiled. Some scoffed. In the elevator, a junior analyst whispered, "She must be brilliant." Another muttered, "It's just a show." But Naomi stayed quiet. She didn't post anything, didn't correct anyone. She just worked. By Monday, she'd already sat in on vendor meetings, reviewed documents in Arabic and German, and corrected 3 long-standing translation errors and major contracts errors that had cost the company thousands. And still, she didn't raise her voice. She just let her results speak. But not everyone was clapping. Late Thursday afternoon, her phone buzzed. An internal memo. Meeting requested by Eleanor Craig. 17th floor. Conference room 5B. Naomi stared at the screen. She'd heard the name. Everyone had. Eleanor Craig had been with the company since the early 90s. A senior board member with sharp eyes and sharper words. She didn't show up unless something needed to be questioned or ended. Naomi climbed to the 17th floor. The conference room door was already ajar. Eleanor was waiting inside, perfectly still. Folder lay closed on the table before her, her pen tapping gently beside it. "Have a seat," she said, not looking up. Naomi sat, silent, stretched. Finally, Eleanor spoke, her voice clipped and even. "I've reviewed your file." Naomi nodded once. "No college degree," Eleanor said flatly. "No formal corporate training. No certifications. No management background." Naomi met her gaze. "That's correct. You were a janitor here." 3 weeks ago, I was. Eleanor leaned back, folding her hands together. "Help me understand how someone with your resume is now handling high-level international affairs." Naomi didn't blink. "Because I speak the languages. I understand the cultures. I've already fixed 2 vendor contracts and moved forward a Moroccan deal that has been stuck for months. I also helped secure a verbal agreement from the Brazilian delegation last week. Legal is finalizing it now." Eleanor's expression didn't change. "You think this company should be run on instinct and charm?" Naomi allowed the smallest smile. "No, ma'am. I think it should be run on results." That landed. For the first time, Eleanor blinked. Naomi didn't soften. She didn't flinch. "I don't need to be liked," she said evenly. "But I need to be useful." I am." Eleanor closed the folder slowly, her mouth a thin line. "You're a gamble." Naomi's voice was quiet. "I've been one my whole life." The meeting ended without congratulations, without dismissal. Just a quiet, unfinished note in the air. Naomi walked out, steady. But instead of going to her office, she took the elevator down, pushed through the revolving doors, and sat on a stone bench across the street. The building gleamed behind her glass, an ambition stretching into the sky. For years, she'd walked past it with cleaning gloves in her bag and 1,000 words she never said aloud. Now the building saw her, but not everyone wanted her there. She pulled out her phone and called her daughter. "Hey, Ma," came the voice on the other end. "Everything okay?" Naomi hesitated, then smiled softly. "Yeah," she said. "I just needed to hear your voice. You sure?" "I'm sure." They talked for a few minutes, nothing urgent. Groceries? Her daughter's dog. Funny commercial on TV. But it calmed Naomi more than any policy ever could. After they hung up, she stood, brushed her palms on her coat, and walked back inside. The security guard at the front desk gave her a nod when he hadn't given before. And as she rode the elevator up, alone, she whispered to herself, "You belong." By the next morning, the story of Naomi's meeting with Eleanor Craig had already rippled through the building, though no one could say exactly how. Some said Eleanor tried to scare her. Others whispered she was testing her. But the part that spread fastest, Naomi didn't back down. She showed up early that day, earlier than anyone expected. She led a morning team sync with 3 departments and reviewed a late-night memo from legal. At 9:15 a.m., she took a call from the German office, entirely in German, and clarified a clause in a vendor contract without needing assistance, and she did it calmly. No flexing, no need to prove, just quiet, steady excellence. At 11:02 a.m., someone wrote on the whiteboard outside her office, "We see you." No name, no fanfare, just 3 words. Naomi stood there for a long moment when she saw it. She didn't erase it. She left it right where it was. That afternoon, something strange started to happen. People came to her office not just with translation needs, but for advice. guidance, reassurance. They came because she made things understandable, because she never made them feel small for not knowing. She sat with interns before big presentations. She coached junior staff on how to navigate calls with international partners. And she never once talked down to anyone. One day, a shy intern Bao from finance peeked his head in. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "How did you learn all those languages?" Naomi smiled. "One word at a time," she said, "same way you will." She wasn't just doing her job. She was changing the culture. That Friday, Graham found her in the break room, pouring tea. "Been hearing good things," he said. She sipped quietly. "Been trying to ignore the bad ones? You're making waves?" She glanced at him. "That a good thing? Around here?" He smiled. "It means you're doing something right." They stood in companionable silence for a moment. Then he added, "You know, I've been thinking about starting a pilot program." She turned slightly. "What kind of program?" "A development track for internal talent, especially those working non-desk roles. Cleaning crews, security, cafeteria staff. Cafeteria staff. There are probably more Naomi Redds in this building." Wait. Naomi set her cup down gently. "There are," she said simply. "And they're waiting." He nodded. "You want to help me build it?" She didn't hesitate. "Already started in my head." By month's end, the program had a name. Voice Inside. It was Naomi's idea. Development track designed not for resumes, but for reality. It offered internal staff from janitorial to cafeteria to maintenance access to language training, mentorship, and cross-departmental visibility. For the first time in the company's history, people who had never been invited to the table were being asked to sit down. Naomi worked late most nights building it, not from ambition, but from memory. She remembered the long nights, the cold tiles, the silence of being invisible. She was designing the very thing she wished had existed when she needed it most. Graham gave her full support, but he didn't interfere. He trusted her to lead, and she did. Word spread fast. By the second week, applicants had doubled. By the third, other departments started volunteering to mentor. And by the fourth, the board took notice. But something else happened too. Naomi was invited to speak at a logistics summit in Cincinnati. It was supposed to be a panel. But when one speaker dropped out last minute, they asked her to open. She stood behind a podium in a beige blazer she bought with her stipend and looked out at the sea of suits, lanyards, and polite expectation. Then she began. "I was never just a janitor," Naomi said. "I was fluent. I was capable. I was ready. But nobody ever looked long enough to see it." She let the silence hold. "We say we're looking for talent, but sometimes we only look where we're comfortable. And in doing so, we miss gold that's already under our feet." A hush settled. "So next time you pass someone pushing a cart, ask yourself, what brilliance just walked by?" The room stood when she finished. It's not because of her title, but because her words cracked something open. On her way out, a young man approached, eyes rimmed with tears. "My mom's a housekeeper," he whispered. "She speaks 5 languages. I used to feel embarrassed to say that." Naomi touched his arm gently. "Don't ever be ashamed of where you come from," she said. "The only thing to be ashamed of is staying blind to brilliance." That night, she didn't sleep. Not because she was anxious, but because something inside her had shifted. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. And more than that, she was now a mirror. Back at Milford Global, something else had changed. The company's main training room where new hires were onboarded, and managers ran development sessions had always been called the Jefferson Suite. Without a meeting or a party, the plaque came down. And a new one went up. The Red Room. No announcement. No flowers. Just brushed steel letters on the wall. Naomi found out when she walked past it on a Tuesday morning. She stood there, still, one hand on the doorframe, one breath held in her chest. Inside, a group of new interns were settling into orientation. One of them leaned to another and asked, "Who's Red?" A senior staff member smiled. "She's the one who reminded us that greatness docenti always wear a title." Naomi didn't go in. She didn't need to. The room was already speaking. And for the first time in a long, long time, everyone was listening. Not every door opens without resistance. And not every legacy welcomes rewriting. A week after the Red Room plaque went up, Naomi received a formal meeting request. This one didn't come from Graham. It came from the compliance committee. The subject line was dry. Request for clarification. Appointment review. The body of the email was worse. Please be prepared to discuss your qualifications, role, transition process, and decision-making scope in recent contract revisions. No signature, no warmth. Just the cold echo of a system that wasn't ready to change. Naomi read it 3 times. She knew what it meant. Someone wasn't just uncomfortable. Someone was angry. Not because she had failed, but because she had succeeded too well, too fast, too visibly. The meeting took place in a windowless room with gray walls and polished floors. 3 senior executives sat at one end of the table, papers stacked high, pens aligned like weapons. She recognized them by reputation. The kind who believed in structure, protocol, process, but not in people like her. One of them, Ms. Dana Hollis, began. We want to ensure the promotion was properly vetted. Naomi folded her hands. It was based on ability, experience, and documented impact. And yet another chimed in. You have no formal degree, no certification in international affairs. Naomi met their eyes calmly. No, I don't. Dana leaned forward. Don't you think that sets a ... risky precedent? Naomi tilted her head slowly. Only if you think paper proves more than results. Silence. She continued, her voice unwavering. I've corrected over a dozen translation errors that cost us time and money. I've helped secure vendor relationships we were losing. I've trained internal teams in cultural etiquette that's improved our global standing. She looked each of them in the eye. If I'm a risk, I'd like to know what your definition of safe has been doing this whole time. No one spoke. The air hung tight with tension. Naomi stood. I didn't come here to defend being seen. I came here to work. And with that, she left the room. That evening, she returned to her office to find a note taped to her door. Black ink, no name, just one line. They're not ready for you. But we are. Inside, on her desk, sat a stack of thank you emails from junior staff, interns, and 2 cleaning crew members. One read. For the first time, I'm thinking about more than just my shift. I'm thinking about what I could become. She stared at it for a long moment, not smiling, not crying, just breathing. She thought of her mother who once folded towels in silence for a hospital that never knew her name. She thought of her father who fixed broken pipes, speaking 2 languages but paid like he knew none. And she thought of herself. A woman once invisible in the very building she now helped shape. That night Graham called. You okay? I'm still standing, Naomi replied. That's more than most. They're coming hard, she said softly. They always do when you shake the walls, he said. But they can't unhear your voice now. You've already opened the door. She nodded, even though he couldn't see it. I just don't want to be the exception, she whispered. I want to be the beginning. Graham said. You already are. 3 months after Naomi Redd walked into Graham Whitaker's office wearing a janitor's uniform, something irreversible had happened. Not just a promotion, not just a program. Culture had shifted. It didn't happen with parades or balloons. It happened quietly. In the way people looked up when they saw the cleaning crew now. In the way interns asked for language learning resources. In the way meetings began with questions like, did we consult the liaison? Naomi hadn't demanded power. She'd redefined presence. The Voice Inside program expanded first to other departments, then to sister offices in Boston and Chicago. By winter, other companies started asking for blueprints, and Naomi. She kept showing up, still early, still prepared. One afternoon, she found a letter in her mailbox, handwritten, crisp envelope, no return address. Inside was a note. I was going to quit last week. I thought I'd never be more than what people saw. But then I heard your story, and I decided to stay. It's not for them. For me, no name, just a spark. That was the thing about sparks. They spread. Naomi was invited to speak at universities, on panels, at leadership retreats. And she always said the same thing. Don't confuse someone's silence with absence. Don't confuse their job title with their ceiling. Talent has no dress code. Intelligence needs no permission. And brilliance. They can walk past you in a uniform, pushing a cart, carrying a mop, and still be more prepared than anyone in the boardroom. People didn't just applaud. They rewrote how they looked at each other and how they looked inward. One evening, months later, Naomi walked back to the 18th floor not for a meeting, just a quiet visit. She passed by her old route, the lobby where it all began. It looked the same, but something was different. People made eye contact now. Security nodded with real recognition. A young employee held the elevator door open for a woman in a cleaning apron and said, "Good evening, ma'am," and meant it. Naomi stepped into the elevator and rode it up, alone. When the doors opened, she didn't go to her office. She walked to the red room. Inside, a new group of hires sat in orientation. She stood in the doorway, unnoticed for a moment, watching the future file in. Then one of them saw her. Eyes widened. "Wait," he whispered to the person beside him. "That's her." She gave a gentle nod and turned to leave. But before she did, she paused and said softly, almost to herself, "If you've ever felt invisible, keep going. If you've ever been overlooked, keep showing up. Because the right person will see you. And when they do, don't just take your seat at the table. Bring chairs for others." Then she walked down the hall, not as a symbol, not as a title, but as herself, Naomi Redd. A name they would never forget. Because she wasn't the end of a story. She was the beginning of something better.